Good. I am your man's Nic Rattlehead, and behind this camera, somewhere in California, is my man's with the master plan, 100 grand. Only you, me, and God knows how much I love this guy, man. My brother, my pal, my compadre, my amigo, Matt the Graff. And we would like to collectively welcome you guys to Aftershock Reviews, your place for the best extreme music reviews. And today I bring to you quite the doozy. And it is Immersion by Denver's death, doom, sludge outfit, Primitive Man. Now, Primitive Man have come out with a plethora of albums, well, technically 2 albums, and splits, especially that awesome one with Hell, and EPs. But this album to me seems like it's the most measured. It seems like it's the most well thought out. It seems like it's wonderfully executed. And it seems like it's just the pinnacle of all of those different statements in one more concise piece. Why did I say concise? Because if we're talking about just LPs, right? Scorn was like 54 minutes. Caustic upped the punishment and then said, yo, check this out, an hour and 12 minutes of this stuff, right? And I'm going to explain to you why I have to make that face when I explain that it's an hour and 12 minutes, because holy cow was it. Oh, bruh. But what Immersion does, it says, cool, I'm going to take this huge sledgehammer and I'm going to trade it in for a knife. Like a shank, right? And I'm just going to repeatedly shank the listener for 36 minutes off of 6 tracks. And I really do enjoy that about that album, because for me, it makes the punishment way more repeatable. And what I mean by that is, once you got out of Caustic, once you got done with songs like Commerce, once you got done with songs like Victim, once you got done with songs like My Will, and the noise pieces scattered throughout it, you had to catch your breath. It was hard, at least for me, to listen to Caustic twice in a row, right? Same with Scorn. But what this album does is it doesn't let up on the punishment. If anything, it might be a little bit more, but because it's in a shorter burst, I can repeat the album again, right? And I really do enjoy that about the album. Now, we're talking about punishment and all these really gnarly verbs or adjectives. Come on, Nick, we know what language is. All these different adjectives to describe this album. The reason I do that is because this album, like most Primitive Man works, is very black. No hope whatsoever. Screw mankind. We're all messed up. The world is going to burn. God doesn't love us. He's not here. It's that type of thing, right? And I really do like that about this album, especially in this year, because I think of all years for Primitive Man to drop an album, this might be the one. And we start off with the track The Lifer, right? Now, here's the thing when it comes to Primitive Man, which I really did enjoy, especially with the previous 2 albums, was the fact that when they did introduce the riffs, especially if we're talking about like Scorn, the title track, which has multiple shredders in it. Oh my gosh. Or we're talking about like My Will or Victim, and we'll get back to Victim in a second. Those riffs were fat. Those riffs sounded like they were played off of Leatherface's chainsaw, right? And the producer was Freddy Krueger. Like it's like that. It's that disastrous and gnarly and sick, right? And the thing that's really differentiating with this album is the fact that there's not really too much in the way of those fat riffs anymore, right? What this album does, and I think it does a better job than any of the previous albums, is setting a soundscape. Because to me, Primitive Man is like a torture chamber, right? It's a torture chamber of things. And it's legit bludgeoning you for a duration of the album. But here what it does is it really slows it down, really hunkering down on the doom metal aspect of it, because you'll notice that they'll drag notes out, right? Or you'll notice that if they're in a 4/4, the percussionist won't actually hit a note until he's ending a phrase. He won't. There's no fills in this album whatsoever. There's no drum fills, no nothing. There's none of that. Like, he literally might hit it on a 2 and then hit you with like some type of percussion rhythm to end the phrase. It's like that. And it's really, really oppressive. It seems like Primitive Man doesn't like you. If I'm being honest, it really doesn't feel like Primitive Man likes you. It's like, how dare you listen to this album? You shall be punished. And that is exactly what happens, especially in the Lifer, because while notes are being dragged out and while the percussionist literally only gives you a little bit of something to end a phrase, Ethan McCarthy is screaming in the midst of all of this while there is static, fuzz, and all sorts of distortion in the background. And you're like, bruh, what? For real? And with the lack of any type of distinguishable riff, right? With the lack of any type of melody or harmony or anything, like, this is completely atonal. This is completely dissonant, right? And the punishment starts immediately, which is a far cry from what Scorn and from what Caustic was doing, because the more catchier songs were near the front of the album. It's like they eased you into the abyss of those albums, right? Like they gave you something catchy in the beginning, and then they eased you into the noise pieces, and they eased you into the long, almost funeral doom-like riffs, right? You get that smooth off the Lifer, and it doesn't even let up on Entity, because Entity drags out this searing guitar note for a minute. It's a minute. If you think I'm jobbing, listen to the track, look at the time code if you ain't got nothing better to do. It's a minute. And then all of a sudden it just smacks with a huge blow to the percussion. It's probably like the floor tom and the kick drum. Jeez Louise. And then Ethan, I can't replicate it. I can't. See, here's the thing. I love a lot of death metal artists, but like his vocal is like what I think of. One of the vocals I think of when it comes to not just death, doom, and sludge, but just metal in general, right? And his vocals are so powerful. His vocals are so pained. His vocals are so cynical. His vocals are so vile and evil. It's otherworldly, right? And Entity literally tries your patience. Right? And then after Entity, bro, we go, and I might have to, I think I'm getting it right. Menacing is right after Entity. And Menacing is wonderful because it starts out slow, just like the previous two tracks. Snail pace, funeral doom, slow. And then all of a sudden we get this groove. And remember I said we will get back to Victim. Well, here we are, because it has a riff in here. Oh, holy cow, there's a riff. And it's very reminiscent of Victim. Very reminiscent, very groovy, very shredding, very uninviting, right? And at some point, as that riff, that groove is starting to come in, I feel like I want to say, tell everyone in town, tell everyone you know. I'll be like, yo, is it Victim? Is he going to start doing this? Well, I love that about it. It's almost like it's hearkening back to what that was, right? And after that, oh, that wonderful groove, and the percussion starts to kind of like break up a little bit. It goes right back into something slow, and then we get into Infinity, which is a 2-minute long noise piece. Now, we had like longer noise pieces on Scorn, but those noise pieces were really broken up when we got to 2017's Caustics, to the point where it's like a minute or maybe a couple of seconds long, and then you went to the next track. Like, and the weird thing about it is like when you're usually doing interludes or noise pieces like this, they usually serve as a breather, right? Whether we're talking about albums like, you know what, Wake's new album from this year, right? Those interludes or noise pieces kind of served as a breather when we're coming off of chunkier bits of the album. It kind of lets you catch your breath. The weird thing about these are they don't let you catch your breath. If anything, it builds the tension. That's a good word for this album. It builds the tension, and it makes you feel even more unnerved and unsettled until it smacks you with foul, right? And when we're talking about foul, I really want to get into the lyrical content of this, because there's a distinct sense of hopelessness and loss, and the fact that we as a human race have truly messed ourselves up, right? To the point of no return. And now Primitive Man is like taking the mirror, turning it around like this and saying, look what you just did. the world is going to end and it's going to go up in flames and it's all your fault. F you. This is where we are now, right? And I want to actually get into one of those lyrics really quickly. So in Foul, he says, and I quote, "Human nature is poisonous and effing foul. Stay the F away from me. Unclear seminal wishes granted. This, a effing misuse of who I am and who I was, betrayed, and now I'm stained. And this is forever." What? Right? That sense of nihilism, that self-loathing and deprecation, it's all here. It's all here. For me, part of me, like in 2017, like it was just I don't want to say it was overbearing. It really was. It literally caustic weighed on you, right? And it wasn't enjoyable. It was good. And I love that album. Album's over there. Love that album, but it wasn't like an enjoyable experience, right? It's kind of like how Caligula from last year by Lingua Ignota, great album, my number 4 album from last year, but it's not an enjoyable experience. And that's what this album is. This album is a look at the destruction, technically, of our world, right? Technically of everything that we know, everything that we hold dear, it's going to go up in smoke, and it's our fault. We did it to ourselves. And the thing about it is, I really can't hate on this album because of that, because the way that this world is going, right? The way that our political system is set up, the way that our social system is set up, all these different things, Primitive Man is kind of right. You know, they're on to something. And with all of this apocalyptic imagery and lyricism and the it just makes this whole album so foreboding and so overwhelming that you can't help but be crushed under the weight in the sheer force of this album. It's great. It's great. I'm telling you, like, this album is something yet again that we needed in 2020, right? It is something I think to me, it might be like a last ditch effort. If you don't shape up, this is it. This is it. This is it. This is it. I love this album. I freaking love this thing. Like, my physical copy is coming in the mail. I highly suggest that you go and you pick this album up. It's called Immersion. It's out now on Relapse Records. You can go pick it up on Primitive Man's Bandcamp. We'll have a link for that in the description below. You can go to Relapse Records store and pick it up there. We'll also have a link for that in the description below, because I really want to drive the point home that we should be in really supporting these bands, right? Because they can't go out on tour, and they're really relying on album sales and merch sales, right? So I really want us to be able to go out and buy these albums and buy their merch and really support the bands that we love. So when they finally do get a chance to hit the road, they got everything they need to put their art out there and perform these pieces for us, man. Perform these pieces for themselves. This is a great album. This is a claustrophobic album, a punishing album, an uninviting album. You have to really enjoy pain to really dig this album. But heck, when it comes to my music, I kind of do. So please check this out. Please check this out. I am your man's Nic Rattlehead. And behind this camera is my man's with the master plan, 100 grand. Tell him one more time, what's your name, man? Matt the Graff. Matt the Graff. Wash your hands. Support your bands. Peace.